Final Fantasy VII, Let's Take the Stairs. Published on my website, accordionsprout.com, 5th of February, 2024. There are house monsters that will attack Cloud and Aerith as they progress through the slums of Midgar. There's giant kaiju monsters released by the planet to wipe humanity from the face of the earth. There's a man with a literal machine gun for an arm. There's a corporation using the DNA of aliens to develop experimental super soldiers, one of whom is a near god-level powerful being who's driven mad by the reality of his birth. There's a tiny, sentient cat wearing a crown who uses a fluffy white fantasy creature called a Moogle to fight. These are all elements of the original Final Fantasy VII video game released for PlayStation in January of 1997. So, naturally, I want to write about the sequence when you run up a flight of stairs. Final Fantasy VII is probably one of the most well-known and well-beloved fantasy, science fiction, cyberpunk video games in the history of the medium. I'll be honest though, I never played the original game until about last year being 2022 when I wrote that sentence. The main reason was because I never owned a PlayStation. I was typically one or two consoles behind, so while my friends were playing Twisted Metal, Castlevania, and Metal Gear Solid, I was still working through Donkey Kong Country on my parents' SNES. That's a Super Nintendo Entertainment System. Needless to say, I missed out on a moment in gaming history, with literally millions of fans across the globe who celebrated it in cosplay, fan art, fanfiction, spicy fanfiction, YouTube videos, or even just playing through the original game. The Final Fantasy franchise remains a staple of the video game market, and Final Fantasy VII is one of the main reasons. The other reason is chocobos. Chocobos are rad, my dudes. The shortest explanation of the plot of Final Fantasy VII is that an ex-soldier named Cloud Strife joins a group of eco-terrorists named Avalanche to help them blow up a chemical reactor in the fictional city of Midgar. One of the members is Tifa Lockhart, a woman Cloud knows from his childhood, and another is Barrett Wallace, a well-built black man who has a machine gun as his... I wrote left arm, but that's incorrect. Barrett's machine gun arm is actually his right arm, so I need to go back in and fix that. Anyway, Cloud goes on a few missions with them, and it's during one of these missions that Cloud gets separated from the group and meets a young woman named Aerith Gainsborough. And I recognize there's going to be a great number of Final Fantasy VII fans who are going to hate me for saying Aerith as opposed to Eris as in the original game, but listen, I'm late to the Final Fantasy franchise. I'm working with what I got. So if you philosophically disagree with this position, by all means, feel free to just put a like down vote on this video. Tell me to go flip myself and go on about your day. But Aerith is Aerith, at least in terms of this video. Or, this is important, play the game and enjoy yourself and don't care so much. Just saying. Aerith helps Cloud get back to his friends. However, she is captured by corporate operatives working for Shinra, the massive company who is also effectively the government of the city of Midgar. Cloud, Barrett, and Tifa decide to rescue Aerith and storm the headquarters of Shinra. There is much, much more to the story, and I've probably done a disservice with this paltry summation, but it's enough for what this essay is concerned with. When Cloud, Barrett, and Tifa arrive, they do some investigating and discover that Aerith is on the 65th floor of the Shinra complex. It's here that the player is given a decision. I can take the elevator and possibly stumble across Shinra staff, or I can take the stairs. Again, Aerith is on the 65th floor. When I played Final Fantasy VII Remake before the original, yes, I know that makes me worse than Satan. Even worse, it makes me a Final Fantasy poser. I took the elevator because I couldn't find the stairs, and also because I was not aware that the stairs option was an iconic moment, not just for the video game itself, but also for millions of fans who had been worshipping this game since 1997 and filling subreddit after subreddit with memes. When I downloaded the original Final Fantasy VII to my PlayStation 5 and started playing it, I decided to take the stairs. Final Fantasy VII was released on the first PlayStation, so until Remake, the player is not going to ascend the entire run of stairs in one go. Instead, I will guide Cloud's sprite up at least 3 flights of stairs before arriving at the next, quote, entrance, and the game will effectively load the next 3 flights after a quick fade to black. Because this is also a PlayStation 1 game, the scene is employing pre-rendered backgrounds, and I suspect, and completely understand, that as I'm cutting from stairwell to stairwell, the game is simply recycling the same background. Cloud is typically the sprite I control throughout most of the non-combat portions of Final Fantasy VII, and the game shows Barret's and Tifa walking into Cloud, indicating that should he encounter soldiers, monsters, robots, etc., they will suddenly be at his side supporting him. This technique was frequently used in what are now, quote, retro games because programmers only had so much space on memory chips and then later graphics cards in order to show figures on screen. Because this is not a combat sequence, however, Barret and Tifa are shown running up the stairs along with Cloud, sometimes passing right by him. This will change the higher up I go. After a few flights, interrupted here and there by Barret complaining about height, and in one unfortunate instance of Tifa calling Barret a word that begins with the letter R, the sprites will begin to stop. Now, if my reader has never played Final Fantasy VII, then they may not realize that outside of combat, the characters are represented by an almost chibi-style 3D sprite, making the characters look more like dolls than human beings. Opinions differ on this representation, but personally, I've always found them cute and charming, especially on the stairs because they begin to stop, hold their knees, and pant, desperate for breath. Climbing the stairs is exactly that. It's climbing one flight after another until the characters reach the top. And where at first the high energy and conviction to rescue Aerith pushed them forward, in no time, these characters are worn out from sheer exhaustion. I tried to find an article or essay about this moment in the original game, but when Google provided me with 16,700,000 search results, most of them were about the remake. There may have been more past the second or third page, but as much as I love this game, at some point, reality sets in and I have to ask how much energy I have to dig through that many websites just to find a quote. On a side note, there's a beautiful coincidence of me refusing to scale 16 million search results while writing about scaling 60 flights of stairs. Just observing that for myself. I did find an article on Kotaku.com published the 24th of April 2020 by Ian Walker titled, Final Fantasy VII Remake made me climb 59 flights of stairs, and I love it. Though brief, Walker's article observes this moment in the newer game while observing how his perception of characters changed and how this iconic scene was remade. He writes, the scene plays out much the same way in Remake as it does in the original, but with a few key changes that act as a wink and nod to old-school players. About halfway up, you lose your ability to run, forcing Cloud to switch back from a brisk jaunt to a trudging shuffle. The energetic theme that reflects the urgency of the rescue mission eventually distorts as Cloud gets more and more worn out. By the end, all three characters need to take a lengthy breather before moving on. I won't lie. At some point, I found myself wondering how much longer this scene was going to last. Moving my joystick in the same configuration over and over again to move Cloud up the stairs, while Barret begged us to go back, and even the athlete Tifa began questioning her resolve, I started to feel a pinch of boredom that festered into frustration. At some point, a thought entered my mind. This wasn't fair. This thought led to a question. Why should I have to do this? While I was researching for this essay and finding little if anything about this stair sequence, I stumbled across a blog post about the original Final Fantasy VII game, specifically about the moment when Cloud has to find a battery to make a propeller move so that he, Barret, and Tifa can make their way to the upper levels of the city of Midgar. Published on September 9th, 2012 by Cameron Kunzelman, and I guarantee you I messed up that person's last word, the article, in praise of the worst design moment in Final Fantasy VII, offers a truly insightful observation about the themes of poverty that run throughout the video game and how the design of certain moments only further develop this theme. It also offers a wonderful answer to my question concerning the stairs. Kunzelman writes, one of the ways that poverty is entrenched structurally is through information control. There are forms to be filled out, there are tax documents to wade through, there are services that are never communicated to the people who need them because, realistically, servicing an entire population is prohibitively expensive. Poverty exists in loops. You never see a way out because you're too busy making ends meet. Or no one shows you, or no one tells you that you need to apply for scholarships by a deadline. To not be homeless, you need a job. To get a job, you need a permanent address, infinite loop. This passage hit me in the gut pretty hard after I read it, mostly because it was painfully familiar. Working in a public library, I encounter people literally every day who are coming in to fax or print off paperwork to government and or legal offices. Most of the time, these documents are related to employment, Social Security, food stamps, and a multitudinous host of other reasons folk in their positions need them to just exist. It gets dispiriting after a while seeing how much runaround folks will have, and by the time I've helped a woman in her 80s make a copy of her driver's license that expired 3 years ago and is held together with tape, I can't help but wonder why she's being put in this situation in the first place. But it's not even just paperwork, because as Kunzelman notes later in his essay, finally, and I think this might be the most important, this section of the game makes sure that the frustration comes only from the architectural difficulties. The battle system, which would generally interrupt the player every 30 steps or so, is suspended. That means the game, in totality, becomes less challenging here. It is a beautiful design. You aren't stressed out or distracted by the battle system or by the ephemeral enemies. Instead, you're locked in a mediation between the self and the system. The act of navigation becomes all-consuming. The movement from abject poverty, where the living being is literally reduced to that which can be killed, to the middle class is the all-consuming goal of the player. Physical barriers in video games have always been tools for designers who either want to test the player's knowledge of mechanics and/or opportunities for narrative flavor. Whether it's the blue maze in Pac-Man, the narrow chasms of Metroid Prime, Snorlax in just about every Pokemon game, or even the endless locked doors in Silent Hill, these barriers are designed to test a player's ability to navigate the world until they find a solution, and also to further entrench the player in the world. Having to walk up 59 flights of stairs is a challenge to the player's resolve, but it's also a brilliant way to remind the player that Cloud, Tifa, and Barret are living in a system that is unfair to them simply because they are not wealthy. Final Fantasy VII is a video game that successfully explores the realities of how poverty creates unnecessary barriers for people to simply move freely through the world. From the beginning to the end of the stairs, the player is given nothing else but the option to walk up them. There is no fight sequence, there are no cutscenes, there's one item on the way up, a single elixir, which the original guidebook for the game calls, quote, your only prize for taking the long way. And there's no moment of final victory. For a good 5 minutes or more, the player is effectively in a walking simulator in a video game where you can literally cast lightning, fire, and ice to fight sentient motorcycle monsters. So why is this sequence so damn memorable? Cloud, Tifa, and Barret are panting and holding their knees by the time they arrive to the top of the final stairwell, and throughout the last few minutes they've been talking to each other, encouraging each other. I get to see these three characters interacting as I ascend the stairs with them, often laughing at poor Barret, who just wants to stop and go back down. Not that I can blame the guy much. The stairs are probably one of the best moments in the game, where everything in the world is stripped away and I'm left alone with three people who are just, for lack of a better word, being. Sometimes the fantastical and cyberpunk elements of Final Fantasy VII keep me from remembering that the video game is a story about human beings fighting for their very survival in a world that seems to be continually challenging their resolve to even keep going. And man, if that ain't life! Every day is an opportunity to give up, to stop trying, and to allow the near-endless obstacles of existence the chance to win out. I could have decided not to try today. I could have decided not to write this essay. I could have not gone out to buy groceries. I could have not brushed my teeth. I could have let one of the endless numbers of cars in the parking lot collide with me and end my existence. I could have just stayed in bed waiting for life to take me. But I didn't, because I chose to keep going. Fans of Final Fantasy VII love the stairs sequence in no small part because it's a funny human moment. Here's mine. At the library where I work, there's 6 flights of stairs. I go up and down these stairs, sometimes multiple times a day. It's a joke I sometimes make, though at times there's a cold prophetic ring to it, that these stairs are one day going to be the death of me. 6 flights of stairs does not sound like much until the sheer verticality of the steps is considered. These are not slow inclines, but rather a 90-degree ascent up to the 3rd floor where I typically work in the local history office. And it's always the case that someone needs me on the first floor as soon as I reach the top while I gasp for breath, desperate for another cup of coffee. There's 59 flights of stairs to ascend in Final Fantasy VII. I know that comparatively, it's not that much. But I've had to go up and down the ones at work multiple times a day, every day for the last 7 years I've worked at that library. So I feel comfortable saying I've got Cloud, Barrett, and Tifa beat by this point. Joshua Jammer Smith, 5th of February, 2024. Howdy, I'm Jammer. So, first off, thank you so much for listening. I tremendously appreciate it. Truly, thank you. I don't know who you are or where you are. I hope you're doing okay. I hope you've had some water to drink today. And if you haven't, go drink a glass of water. And no, your mother did not call me and ask me to tell you that. Although, you could call her a little more often and you could try to drink a little bit more water. Just saying. Either way, thank you for listening. It really does mean a lot to me. And of course, let's get through the usual YouTube stuff. If you liked the video, please like, share, subscribe, all that jazz. It helps me, it helps the channel because it gets me close to the algorithm, or as close as you can in this what the flip nightmare that is the YouTube algorithm these days. But honestly, even put aside all that, it just means a lot to me because it lets me see people are actually interacting with these. And, anything and everything, I appreciate it. Then, two, if you like the channel and you want to contribute in a meaningful way, I do have a Patreon. It's just patreon.com/jammerdraws. It's in the description section below, and there is literally only one tier. It is a $1 a month tier. So, if you've got $1 this month you don't mind parting with, or $12 this year, I treat it the way street musicians leave out their, their container or a hat. If you like the music, in this case, if you like the podcast, the channel, the writing, the visual art that I make outside of this, throw a buck in my hat. I really appreciate it. Now, with all that done, let's get to the important thing. Was it really 59 flights of stairs in Final Fantasy VII? So first off, I made sure that I Googled flights of stairs, and I made sure a flight of stairs is typically 13 to 16 steps. Now, if we look at the visual construction of a set of stairs, a flight is not one set of stairs that goes up halfway through a floor and then the second half goes the way to the top. We're talking just one row of 13 steps. Everything I could find online and everything in the guidebook as well pointed and continually reemphasized that it's 59 flights of stairs in the original Final Fantasy VII. So, as of this recording, I'm going to go with 59. If somebody out there has actually done the math and figured out how many flights exactly it is in the original Final Fantasy VII, not remake, please, by all means, leave a comment in the comment section below because I'm legitimately curious and those numbers kind of bounced around and I want to make sure I'm doing this right. But after the exact specific number, it really doesn't matter how many flights of steps there is. The point is, these three characters are ascending stairs going all the way up to the 65th floor of a massive skyscraper on foot. And that's if you take the stairs. If you take the elevator, you're not going to be experiencing that. So, again, if you take the elevator, you'll completely miss this. And the only reason I took the stairs was because in the original game, I couldn't find the elevator. I looked for it. When I played Remake for the first time, like I noted in the essay, I took the elevator. Which, funnily enough, when I was playing Remake, I couldn't find the stairs. So that's why I took the elevator. So that's ultimately the reason how kind of my awareness of this came about. But looking at the stairs again, I've already covered most of it in the essay itself, but I still think this is one of the most interesting passages or the most interesting moments in Final Fantasy VII as a design sequence, because if we consider it as an aspect of design, it's really interesting. Because again, there is so much meta commentary and metaphors and just outright, what am I trying to say here? There's just so much commentary in the game about classicism and how it is affecting, or class-based differences, and how it's impacting the characters like Cloud, like Barrett, like Tifa. The whole reason Cloud begins with Avalanche is because he needs money. He doesn't have any other job. I mean, from the very beginning, the game is about the lower classes trying to fight the upper classes, which are making life miserable. I'm not a socialist, but Lord, you know there's probably dozens of socialist readings of Final Fantasy VII out there. And again, I want to emphasize, this is not me trying to take anything in the way of a dramatic political angle with this at all. This is simply to observe the fact that in this moment, the game is using these class differences in a specific sequence. On the first part, to kind of tell just a joke, because anybody who's going to run up 59 flights of stairs, you know they're doing it because either A, they think they're going to be rewarded for it, or B, they're doing it for the lulz. Likewise with designers, something like that. Are we really going to provide players the option to climb 59 flights of stairs? Yeah, sure, why not? Why were they doing that? Well, because you can either reinforce the idea that Shinra is this massive soulless corporation that is so oblivious to the plight of common everyday people that they would, one, follow fire code laws and make sure that there was a set of steps in their building, but then also two, possibly situate it so that certain individuals working in that building would have to take the stairs regularly in order to ascend or descend the building. It's an interesting structure. And narratively and rhetorically speaking, it really further emphasizes the fact that Cloud and Tifa and Aerith and Barret are fighting constantly just to survive. And especially in this moment when the life of Aerith or Eris, whatever you prefer, is literally on the line, once again, there is an unnecessary obstacle set in front of them. Now again, I know you could take the elevator and skip the whole thing. But I have no defense of that statement. So I'm just going to say, the stairs are really interesting, and it's really disappointing to me that not more people are really writing anything of substance about it. And that's the thing I wanted to comment here too, is that most of the writing about Final Fantasy VII these days that I can find online is primarily a lot of kind of nostalgia-ridden, them's were the days sort of attitude about it. Which I get it. We're getting to a point where there are a number of people who played Final Fantasy on their PlayStations when they were young, so the game is moving into retro status. People are thinking back on it fondly, reminiscing about it. And I mean, with the remakes coming out, you have other sort of commentary there. But at the same time, it's interesting to observe how few people are really approaching these tiny moments in the game with a real rhetorical interest. Or if they are, they're focusing on the sort of meta commentary of Sephiroth and the comet and fighting and then all this other stuff. And it's good, it's interesting, but there's so many small moments like this in Final Fantasy VII that really reveal the depth of humanity that is being expressed and explored here. These characters are struggling to survive because of their class, because of just the very nature of their life, while alternatively, there are people who are amassing scores of countless wealth, pursuing the most ludicrous philosophical goals out there, who are so apathetic about the lives of other people that they literally drop an eighth of a city on top of them. Like, seriously, it's not fair. Why is this happening? Well, these are great questions, and I think it's another one of the reasons why Final Fantasy VII remains such a fun video game, why such an interesting video game, and why people are still talking about it decades after the first one was released. But at this point, I realize I've spent almost 8 minutes now talking about it after the fact, and, writing should be its own thing. Writing should be the totality of what I want to write. Writers write, and I'm starting to ramble now like I'm usually doing. So, let's end it here with, as always, thank you so much for listening. I tremendously appreciate it. Go play some video games.